The morning began quietly, with the kind of stillness that feels almost soft. The sky was pale, like it hadn't decided on its color yet, and the neighborhood moved slowly, with only a few birds making sound. I was stepping out to take the trash when I noticed my elderly neighbor, Mr. Harris, standing by his porch, leaning heavily on the railing. He usually smiled, usually waved, usually told me some small joke to make the morning lighter. But today his face was tight with pain, and his breathing sounded wrong, sharp and thin. I walked over and saw the tremor in his hands. He tried to brush it off, saying it was just one of those days, but I knew it wasn't. Something in his eyes looked scared, and that scared me too. He had no family nearby, no children around, and he lived alone with quiet rooms and fading photographs on the walls. So when he finally admitted he needed help, I didn't hesitate. I helped him into my car carefully, making sure he was steady, and I promised I'd stay with him the whole time. The drive to the hospital felt longer than usual, even though the roads were clear and silent. The hospital where my wife Laura worked wasn't far. I knew every hallway by memory, every corner and every dull-painted wall, because I had waited there so many times before for her shift to end. It always carried that strange mix of calm and fear in the air. When we arrived, I helped Mr. Harris into a wheelchair and rolled him inside. The smell of antiseptic, the soft beeping of machines, and the steady footsteps of nurses filled the space around us. Everything seemed normal. Everything felt controlled. I thought this would be just a regular checkup, maybe something manageable, maybe something that would pass. Then my wife walked out. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't frantic. She was simply doing her job, moving with her calm, gentle way, clipboard in her hands and her expression focused. But the moment her eyes lifted and found the man in the wheelchair, something inside the air changed. She stopped walking. She didn't blink. Her face went still, the color draining slowly like someone had pulled away a light. The hallway seemed to freeze with her, and every sound suddenly felt louder, harsher, like the world had sharpened. I watched her chest rise once, then again like she had forgotten how to breathe and needed to relearn it. "Laura," I said softly, but she didn't answer right away. She was staring at him like she was seeing a ghost. The elderly man turned his head slowly, as if unsure why the room had gone so quiet. When his eyes landed on her, something painful flickered across his face too. Not recognition at first, more like shock, then grief. For a moment they simply stared at each other. Two people standing on opposite sides of a long, painful memory. My wife finally whispered, "Dad." The word broke something open inside the hallway. I felt it. Even the air seemed to move differently. I looked at Mr. Harris, confusion flooding me, then surprise, then a slow understanding that didn't quite fit at first. He closed his eyes like the word hurt, like it cut deeper than anything the hospital could treat. He swallowed hard, and I saw tears beginning to gather. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he said, his voice trembling. Until that moment, I only knew one version of my wife's childhood. A story where her father had left and never came back. A story filled with silence, unanswered questions, and a wound she rarely spoke about. I had imagined him as distant, careless, maybe simply gone. I never imagined he was just a few houses down, living quietly alone, only a short walk from us all this time. Laura finally moved slowly, like her body had been frozen and now each motion hurt. She knelt in front of him, her eyes shining with tears that didn't fall yet. "You lived near me," she whispered. "All this time you lived near me." He nodded, ashamed. "I watched you grow up from a distance. I was a coward. I thought staying away would protect you from my mistakes. I thought I didn't deserve to be in your life anymore." It was quiet then, painfully quiet. The hallway disappeared for a moment, and it was just the three of us, standing inside a history I didn't know existed. I felt like an outsider to something deep and personal, but also someone who had somehow carried the missing piece here without knowing. Laura's voice was soft when she finally spoke again. "You should have come. Even if you thought I'd hate you. Even if you thought I'd send you away. You should have come." He nodded again, tears falling now. "I know. I know." His breathing grew shallow and he winced, the pain reminding us why we were here in the first place. The doctors came then, asking questions, checking numbers, preparing to take him inside for tests. But before they wheeled him away, he reached for Laura's hand. "I never stopped loving you," he whispered. I was just too weak to face what I broke. Laura held his hand, her tears finally falling silently down her cheeks. Then don't be weak now, she said gently. Stay. Let me decide what to do with the past. Just stay. They took him away after that, and I wrapped my arms around my wife as she leaned into me, shaking softly. The twist of fate was strange, almost unreal. I had simply helped a neighbor. I thought I was doing something small, something kind. I didn't know I was bringing my wife face to face with a part of her life she had buried for years. Hours passed slowly. Hospitals do that. Time stretches and thins, leaving you with too much silence and too many thoughts. Laura sat beside me, quiet, occasionally wiping her eyes, occasionally staring at nothing. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't crying as hard. She just looked tired. But there was something else too. Something like relief. The kind that comes when a door you thought was locked forever finally opens. When the doctor finally came out, he told us Mr. Harris would be okay. It wasn't the end. It wasn't hopeless. It was something they could treat, something that needed care and time but not goodbye. I felt the breath my wife had been holding finally leave her chest. We went to see him. The room was dim, peaceful, filled with the soft hum of machines. He looked weaker but calmer, like he had laid down a heavy weight he had carried for years. When Laura walked in, he smiled through tired eyes. I didn't expect grace today, he said quietly. But you gave it to me anyway. She sat beside his bed, taking his hand again. This time it wasn't full of shock or pain. It was gentler. Sad, yes. Complicated, absolutely. But there was warmth there. Something beginning, not ending. I don't know what will become, she told him honestly. But I don't want to live the rest of my life wondering anymore. We can start slow. We can talk. We can try. He nodded, tears in his eyes again, but softer ones this time. Grateful ones. As I stood beside them watching two lives quietly reconnect, I felt something warm settle in my chest. Sometimes life doesn't shout its turning points. Sometimes it whispers them in hospital rooms, in broken voices, in hands finally reaching out after years apart. We left the hospital later, not with fear, but with something like quiet hope. The sky outside was darker now, but not heavy. Just calm. The world felt slower, gentler, as if it understood something important had shifted. And as we walked to the car, my wife slipped her hand into mine and held it tightly. Thank you, she said softly, for taking him, for staying, for not knowing, and still being exactly where I needed you to be. I squeezed her hand back. Sometimes the most ordinary acts lead us to the deepest places in our hearts. Sometimes a simple ride to the hospital can reopen a doorway to love, healing, and the chance to finally breathe again.